Let's celebrate bold new beginnings, the director said cheerfully into his microphone, as if he were announcing some kind holiday. We were sitting 70 people in a conference room, the dim light of the lamps, cold coffee, and the forced smile of HR, a sure sign that something unpleasant was about to happen. And he said it. We made a difficult decision to optimize our work. Optimize the favorite word of bosses, which always means the same thing. My name was fourth on the list. We thank her for her years of service. But moving forward, we must renew the team. Then I didn't hear anything. There was a buzzing in my ears. My hands went cold, as always, before I can either faint or break down. No warnings, no hint. Just dismissal in front of 70 colleagues. For 15 years, I kept the most difficult federal contracts afloat, solved all the problems, plugged all the loopholes. And for the new director, some star, a graduate of Linton with a passion for cryptocurrencies, I turned out to be just extra weight. Someone clapped, and a few more. Polite, empty applause. I even heard it. You can handle it, period. Handle what? With 15 years reduced to a single line on a slide. HR handed me a branded anti-stress ball in a cardboard box, as if I was supposed to burst into tears and hug everyone. I said nothing, just nodded, as if I were excused from jury duty, and walked out the side door. But the real story started in the elevator. I took out my phone and logged into the compliance portal. Two-factor verification. Fingerprint. Password. Session opened. Found Form 1916 by. Change of responsible officer. Immediately. Period. I hit send. An alert appeared. An order will be issued to suspend all contracts requiring active monitoring. I hit confirm. The elevator doors opened. I walked out free. They didn't understand one thing. I wasn't just the person who kept track of paperwork and reminded people of deadlines. I was the official responsible officer for every federal and defense project. And by law, when such an employee leaves, the company has exactly 24 hours to notify the supervisory authority and stop work on the contracts. This is not up for discussion. It's the law, a law with teeth and fines that can tear a company apart in a week. I didn't need to argue, cry, or beg for respect. I just had to press a button. By the time I got down to the parking lot, HR had already sent me an email with a resignation summary and a link to the transition experience survey. I almost laughed. I deleted the email and turned off my phone. Let them enjoy the silence, because by the time they realize what I've done and what they've lost, it will be too late to fix it without me. And I wasn't feeling generous. At 8:47 a.m., the first message arrived in Slack. Has anyone else lost access to Project Merlin? At 9 a.m., 2 new ones. The federal cloud is down. There's a compliance error on the login screen. At 10:30 a.m., they removed all engineers from federal and defense projects. Not suspended, but removed. Entire teams were sent to review documentation. What does HR mean? Sit quietly and pretend to work while the lawyers try to work a miracle. Usually, everything on the compliance dashboard was glowing with green check marks, but here it's red. Red. Non-compliance, non-compliance. Waiting for a new responsible officer. An explosion swept through the company in less than 12 hours. At precisely 12:12 p.m., a short email arrived for the company's lawyer. No logo, no extra words. Black Snyroman. One sentence. Your organization is no longer considered compliant to work on federal and defense contracts under sections 48 and 32. There were no signatures, only a reference number for the IP file with the order to suspend work. It already contained fines, $100,000 for each hour. The countdown began at 5:52 p.m. the previous day, 27 minutes after I got into the elevator and submitted the form. And at that time, I was sitting at home in a robe, tea in hand, feet on the table. I watched everything slowly collapse like a train wreck. Link is burning. Notifications are crashing one after another. Sorry to hear such news. Hang in there, period. Really, you got fired. What nonsense. A huge mistake on their part. You always had a quiet but strong influence. Quiet, yes, but not powerless. Messages came from former colleagues, engineers, project managers, even from managers I didn't particularly tolerate. Everyone tried to make it sound like it was an accident. Listen, do you know who's in charge of the risk matrix now? Hey, do you by any chance still have access to the old Chcart 17 portal? I left everything unread. And no, it wasn't gloating. Gloating is when you win a quiz. And this, it was different. Cold justice. Not revenge, not sabotage, just consequences. Quiet, precise, inevitable consequences. Meanwhile, the open Slack channels in the company descended into chaos. Developers argued over passwords. Managers shouted about deadlines. Someone tried to escalate a problem, but they posted a screenshot of the error. Access denied. The responsible officer is no longer active. There is no replacement. Period. There was no replacement because one was never appointed. And why would they care about me? I never made a scene, didn't play politics, didn't ask for a raise or loud thanks. I just did my job so well that no one even understood how I did it until I stopped. Somewhere in a glass office, I imagined the director squinting at that letter and wondering how a company worth 700 million supers with temporary systems and stability could collapse because of a woman we deemed unimportant. The truth was quickly becoming obvious. They fired, not the administrator removed the keystone. And the keystone is only noticed when the arch collapses. By Friday morning, panic had already taken hold. At 7:31, the lawyer sent an email. The risk management and Complos systems were urgently blocking access to the account. They tried bypassing it, but it was denied. They restarted the server, but it was still blocked. Even the super user received the same message. Access is only possible for the responsible officer. The current officer was missing, period. They decided it was a glitch. They always think it's a glitch, as if the systems themselves decide to go on strike on payday. They restarted the server cluster twice, to no avail. At 8:15, the CTO stumbled into the war room with half a protein bar and said, "We disabled her access when she left," and shrugged, as if it weren't his problem. He didn't even look up from his phone. But the lawyer didn't shrug. The lawyers broke into a sweat and started rummaging through old contracts. A young employee found one line in a dusty PDF from 2012. Only the designated responsible officer can confirm, change, or disable a company's federal Complos status in the system. And then everyone in suits realized it. They had fired not a manager, not a single paperwork clerk. They had removed the only person standing between the company and federal reprisals. At 9:12 a.m., I had 17 missed calls, 12 from HR, 3 from lawyers, 1 from the COO, and the last from the CEO himself. I ignored them all. No voicemails, no messages. Only the growing tension of their silence. They even tried to manually restore my rights in the system, but the system flagged it as an unauthorized attempt to replace the responsible officer and automatically sent a signal to the regulatory agency. Now some intern there saw a red flag. This company is trying to circumvent its Complos. At 10:47 a.m., they stopped guessing and started to panic. The VP of customer service canceled. I had a meeting with a defense contractor. Their joint portal showed a gray icon. Gray means uncertified. And uncertified means bills aren't being paid, contracts are frozen, deadlines are missed, money is leaking. And I was still sitting at home in my robe, stirring honey into my tea and listening to Sin in the background. Every couple of minutes, I refreshed LinkedIn and watched my former colleagues change their statuses. Looking for a new job, open to new opportunities. What does that mean in corporate? This ship is burning, and I have no lifeboat. They couldn't even message me from work emails. They purged my name from my contact list as if I were contagious. But that was the point. My ID was still listed as active in the Complos system until the transfer was confirmed. Not because they forgot to remove me, but because the system simply didn't allow it, and no one understood. Firing me wasn't enough. They needed my consent, my signature, to complete the process. That was the law. Not a recommendation, not advice, but rules. Until this happened, any of their projects with a state label was considered infected. I took a sip of tea and turned off the notification. Let them scream into the void. This isn't my fire anymore. Let them put it out themselves. At 11:42, a chain reaction began. A collapse, or worse, a slow hemorrhage. One after another, contracts were in violation. First, Defense Logistics Incorporated flagged them, then 2 aerospace contractors, then a sensitive ampersand division under export control. By lunchtime, 6 organizations had officially declared non-compliance, 4 had frozen payments, and 1 had gone completely nuts. Due to the order to suspend work, Contract 445 is no longer considered in violation. All projects have been stopped. Fines will be applied under Section 9.2. In translation, you owe us money. A lot, period. The CFO, a quiet sweater lover who always considered Compla something like background music, suddenly started twitching his eye. He calculated the losses, then recalculated them again, and by 2 p.m. sent out an urgent letter. Fines of $100,000 per hour. Immediate action is mandatory, period. He even set a timer at the top of the letter, ticking in real time. Theatrical, desperate, and completely useless. They called an emergency meeting of the board of directors. Not over OM, but in person. That means things are really bad. I wasn't there, of course, but I have quiet friends who know how to forward letters without a trace. And here's what I learned. The CEO began the meeting already sweating, opening the presentation with the title Causes of Operational Failure. The first words were, "The problem is with the middle management." Classic cowardly blaming the middle. He pointed his finger at everyone. CDO, you should have realized that revoking her access would set off a chain of events. Lawyers, why wasn't there a backup responsible officer? HR, who signed off on a dismissal without a role transition plan. Even the purchasing director got it. Why? Is she still listed in the 2015 contract? Everyone sat stunned until someone, most likely the chief legal officer, simply opened the compliance charter and began reading it out loud. The rules clearly stated, the appointment of the responsible officer is not transferred or revoked without written confirmation from the officer. If there is no such confirmation, all system contracts and certificates are blocked. That line had my name on it. They were mistaken, thinking my role was formal. Just a checkbox on a form to order badges or book a meeting room. But over 10 years, I had integrated myself into every process that kept their million-dollar contracts legal. And now everything was starting to fall apart like a sweater in a washing machine full of scissors. The board of directors asked only one question. Could she restore her access? The lawyers hesitated, then answered, yes, but exactly. And it hit them like a train without brakes. Access can only be restored voluntarily, in writing, and with consent recorded in the system. If I don't want it, restoration is impossible. Silence. I imagine that room smelling of markers, stale coffee, and the panic of people who understand. The house is on fire, and the fire extinguisher left yesterday on heels with a smile. While they argued and blamed each other, I sat calmly at home, recalling all the mess I've been cleaning up over the years. Late-night inspections, urgent crises, murky contracts with suppliers that could attract intelligence agencies, and risks I neutralized before the lawyers even found out about them. I used to do this because I believed in the business. I believed we were building something worth protecting. But that faith died the moment they handed me a cardboard box and called it a team update. Now this chaos was their problem alone. I wasn't helping them, and I had no intention of doing so. In 1817, while the board was arguing over whose head to chop off first, the IT guys decided to try force. They hacked the control console, tried to manually remove my name, and assign a new responsible officer from the list. They were looking for suitable candidates, people with attractive resumes but without the necessary clearances. The system let them play around. The menus worked, the new names popped into place, but when I clicked save, a gray federal message appeared. Transfer blocked. The current ARO must authorize the change through signed Form 1916C. They're in the fine print. Unauthorized attempts to circumvent the ARC protocol will be reported under 48 CFR Section 9406. The lawyers recognized it and froze. Someone nervously joked, maybe we should just forge her signature? And then the CEO, red and tired, looked up from his laptop and said out loud, then just forge her signature. The room fell dead silent. The chief legal officer, usually a quiet nerd in orthopedic shoes with a cup of ginger tea, suddenly aged 10 years in 10 seconds. He put his hands on the table and said in a voice as brittle as ice, This is a felony, a federal crime. Minimum 5 years. There's nothing more to discuss. For 30 seconds, the room was silent. No one even coughed. And then it dawned on them. There's no way around it. No, we'll patch it later. There's no way around this. You'll reboot the server, and you won't come out unscathed. They needed me. Meanwhile, I sat at home, calm as a cat in the sun. I opened my laptop, went to LinkedIn, and hit Update Profile. I removed the line Senior Complos Officer from the hidden title and wrote a new position. Independent Complos Consultant. Federal Risks. Defense and Dual-Use Projects. Period. I added just one line to my resume. I'm currently considering new offers. Only selective projects. Period. I didn't send this directly to anyone. There was no need. Within an hour, my profile views had tripled. By evening, 2 emails arrived from private defense contractors. By morning, 3 more. Everyone was interested. Everyone was in a hurry. Everyone urgently needed advice. One wrote directly, "Did you hear what happened? If you're the Roro everyone's talking about, we need to talk." Rumors spread, and the title itself implicitly hinted at denial. The director ordered the PR team to write a statement, something about unexpected regulatory difficulties and active cooperation with federal agencies. Empty words. No one believed it. Contractors had already refused, politely writing in legalese, "Contact us when you re-legal again." Everything collapsed within the company. Morale was zero. Teams were reshuffled. Communications were suspended. Budgets were frozen. The CEO tried to cheer everyone up with a post on SLC about resilience in the face of difficulties. In response, someone posted a GIF. The Titanic orchestra plays while the ship sinks. 87 reactions. Meanwhile, lawyers and consultants spent nights studying that very clause of the charter, my clause, and kept returning to the same line. All power cannot be transferred without the personal participation and confirmation of the current responsible officer. His consent must be clear and voluntary. What did it mean? Even if they got through, even if they begged or offered to bring me back with great fanfare, the system still wouldn't accept it, unless it was obvious that I agreed to it myself. And I didn't answer the calls. And then, on Monday, at exactly 8:9, the Empire received its first real blow. The $14 million contract, which had been in the works for years and which was key to the quarterly report, was simply cut off by the government as if it were gelatin. The official document was written dryly and bureaucratically. Due to the current non-compliance with the requirements for the assignment and control of Arero, contract number 8774 is terminated under Clause 52.2096. Interaction is suspended until the status of the points is confirmed. Transfer. You fired the only person who could sign this deal. Now you're radioactive. Goodbye. The cancellation of the contract hit the management like a bomb with subpoenas. The financial director tried to wriggle out of it, talking about temporary difficulties and contract delays. But no one believed him, not even the advice. Directors, not clients, and especially not investors, who had been swarming around like nervous hyenas since news of the work stoppage leaked. By midday, the Shareholder Relations Department sent out an internal message. The quarterly report will be changed to discuss regulatory difficulties. Translated, we don't know if we even have the right to make money right now. At 2 p.m., the message arrived. Of course, not directly, no one had the courage anymore. It came through Monica, a former colleague from the risk department, who was now consulting for the firm on the same contract that had just burned down. We used to hide together in the pantry and eat lunch there when the cafeteria was too noisy. She wrote, "He wants to talk. He says it's urgent, promises to fix everything. Pass on the number." I stared at the screen for a minute, dialed. "Say I'm busy, I'm consulting," and deleted it. In the end, I just left her message unread. Not out of petty revenge, but precision. This is no longer about anger. Not about revenge, isn't about ego, it's about power. For the first time in years, I was no longer insurance or duct tape used to seal holes until the next inspection. I was the gate, the only one, and I had the keys. I couldn't be replaced, couldn't be forged, and couldn't be forced. Because in that very charter that I rewrote 8 years ago after a major mistake with export control, there was a line, Clause 9A, The return of Roro's powers must be initiated voluntarily by the current Roro himself. If he doesn't agree or doesn't respond, the return is blocked for 6 months. 6 months. In the world of government contracts, that's not a pause, it's a death sentence. And if I officially declare even once that I don't want to return, the system freezes my position. No rounds, no powers of attorney, no shady schemes. Just silence and consequences. And I sat in that silence, absorbing it. It took the place where anxiety used to live, because for 15 years I worked without days off, without holidays. It extinguished fires I didn't start. I saved deals by catching hidden mines in contracts, saving the company from its own complacency. And the gratitude was a cardboard box and a talk about staff renewal. Well, they renewed it. Contracts are broken. Shares are sliding down like ice on hot glass. And for the first time, I feel calm, untouchable. Monica wrote again a couple of hours later. He's seriously ready to meet anywhere, anytime. He wants to apologize. Period. I didn't respond because apologies aren't signatures. And certainly not the return of authority. That required a completely different kind of readiness, and I didn't have it yet. By Tuesday, their pretty excuses had run out, and real panic was starting to set in among the $500 chairs. At 9:03 a.m., I received an email from an unknown address. Probably some intern or assistant with a double surname tasked with reaching out after management burned everything down. Bridges. Subject: interim appointment proposal. The text read like it was written by hysterical lawyers and PR people. We would like to formally invite you to return to the company in a transitional capacity as a responsible employee to assist with system recovery and regulatory matters. Term: 60 days. Pay: current salary plus 20%. We hope to rebuild trust and cooperate in good faith. Not a word, sorry. No mention of a public dismissal. No hint that 72 hours ago they tried to forge my signature. Just 60 days of a bandage on a bullet wound. I didn't respond. 5 hours later, the COO contacted me directly. She always looked smooth, spoke confidently like a podcast host, and felt about as bad as a dead fish. She called from a private number and left a voicemail. We are offering a consulting contract. Triple pay. Remote work. Complete freedom of action. Only a few signatures and reports are required. In exchange, complete confidentiality. Everything will be clean. Easy. Easy. The word easy resonated like a paper cut. I've been cleaning up after them for 15 years. And now they wanted everything to be easy. I dragged it out for a day and only then responded. Or rather, not to her. I forwarded the voicemail to my lawyer and asked her to draft an official response. The client is ready to discuss possible cooperation subject to receiving a full proposal in writing. All further communication must be through a legal representative. 15 minutes after the lawyer sent the letter, the CO called again, this time without a message. And in the evening, the company's internal chats were leaked to a private Discord, where current and former employees were sitting. There, they shared a draft report for the board of directors. The picture was dire. Revenue forecasts had collapsed. Another $6 million contract had been suspended. The state was investigating contractors. One director had already resigned. 2 others were going to be investigated for management failures. And in the midst of all this, there was a line like a clot behind the smile. The decision depends on whether we can secure her cooperation. In the report, I saw a line. Current position unanswered. Recommendation to offer a retention bonus. Legal deterrence if necessary. Legal deterrence. They wanted to deter me. I printed out this page not for evidence, but for pleasure. I framed it on my desk between a mug with the inscription, "First coffee, then chaos," and a certificate from 2014 when I uncovered a fraudulent scheme in time and saved the company from a tax audit. This was always my game. I set up barriers, signed off on the risk matrix, plugged holes before the auditors came. I saved them from their own greed and stupidity more times than I can count. And they thought I'd agree to triple pay and silence? No, that's not help, that's leverage. And leverage comes not from strength, but from position. I let them sweat. Every hour of my silence cost them hundreds, thousands. Every minute brought the CEO closer to collapse. The board of directors was already preparing something behind closed doors. They needed help. They begged for the right not to drown in their own mess. In the letter, they wrote politely, "We believe that a direct and honest conversation will help all parties find a solution." Translation: "We are bleeding and want you to come before the patient dies." I replied that I would think about it. This meant I would come whenever I wanted. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. I walked in at 10:23 minutes to the hour. No drama, no loud footsteps, just quietly into a room full of expensive suits. The air was so thick with tension that it could have been divided into shares. The CEO was in the middle of a hysterical monologue. He saw me, fell silent, then abruptly launched into an attack. "You can't even imagine the damage you've caused. Contracts, workplace, value for shareholders." He didn't have time to finish. The lawyer jumped up like that so abruptly that his chair creaked. He grabbed CO by the arm, as if dragging him away from a fire. "Sir, that's enough." Silence fell over the room. And then he said calmly, but so that everyone could hear, "Only she can sign the restoration." Not one of them, not the best option, but all eyes turned to me. Not to my face, but to my hands. These hands were now the only bridge between them and the millions flying into the void. I didn't sit, didn't smile, didn't say a word, just placed my bag on the table slowly so that the sound of skin echoed in the silence. I took out a notepad, clicked a pen, and began writing. Not for them, for myself. Let them guess, is this a list of conditions or a note for the authorities? Sue opened his mouth, but the lawyer shook his head sharply and firmly. "Any word you say now could look like pressure. Without her consent, there will be no negotiations." The phrase of her consent hung in the air like a blade of gelatin. I looked around the room. Directors, they were fidgeting in their chairs, who stared at the table, as if seeking salvation in the drawing of a tree. Sifa was tapping his pen too quickly. Everyone was glancing at their watches, counting the losses by the minute. And I was calm. They finally understood what I knew from the start. All the cards were in my hands, and they were only sitting at this table because I allowed it. I remained silent until everyone in the room looked at me twice. First in shock, then in the realization that they had no way out. Without further ado, I took a single sheet of paper from my bag and placed it on the table. 3 points. 7 figures sum transferred in 48 hours. All benefits reinstated retroactively. Health, pension, shares, immediate resignation of the CEO before the ink dries on my reinstatement. None. We'll discuss it. Just the facts. At the bottom, the last line, written in my neat handwriting. Refusal to agree is equal to official notice of refusal to return under point 9A. In this case, restoration is blocked for 6 months. No discussion. I leaned back in my chair. Your choice. The CEO opened his mouth, ready to lose it, but the lawyer abruptly cut him off. She's right. Clause 9 blocks everything for 6 months. No court or appeal will change that. The room fell silent, as if the air had disappeared. Everyone was weighing the millions in losses in a day or the amount that should be transferred to me immediately. It would be a shame to fire the CEO or a shame to explain to the shareholders why contracts are frozen. The CFO stopped typing. The CEO looked up. The chairman of the board leaned forward, staring at my sheet as if it were his last lifeline. "Do it," he said. The CEO tried to object, but the chairman's gaze pinned him in place. I didn't smile. I didn't say a word. I took my heavy silver pen out of my bag, the same one I bought after my first big win. I signed the documents calmly, with the same movement with which they had once begun their freeze. Without pathos. I put the pen down. She stood up, pushed the papers toward the lawyer, and left without a backward glance or a word. Only the quiet click of the door left them alone with the consequences. M.